Welcome back to the Lore and Valor podcast. I'm your host, Justin Watson, and we're here to talk about Arcane Episode 4. I know this episode's been a long time coming. We had some good stuff, had some bad stuff delaying the show, but I'm really glad to be joined once again by my co-hosts, Joelle Presby, author of fantasy, science fiction, and hard science fiction, and a Naval Academy graduate who used to play with the power of the atom for Uncle Sam. And then also Kacey Azell, reformed Rotorhead. I guess not reformed Rotorhead. You still have
not reformed.
Gig.
No.
Yeah, you still got a flying gig.
Unrepentant Rotorhead.
So Kacey is recently retired from the United States Air Force. So congratulations, Kacey, on your career, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you.
So Arcane Episode 4. I like this one a lot. And it's kind of it's definitely the act break. It's the beginning of second act, right? Where we start to see the new status quo. So the show was already at an A+ coming out of episode 3 for me. I think would anyone disagree with that one? Was there any trepidation going into episode 4 from 3?
Episode 3 kicked it out of the park. The time jump for this episode, you can hear it in my voice. I'm still a little sick. I first watched this episode. I've been trying to wait and watch these right before we're talking about them, but I knew we were going to talk about it, so I watched it even while I was sick, and I was confused because there was a time jump, and I missed that there was a time jump. Why is Jinx so much taller? Is this one of those things where, like, suddenly when she's not standing next to her sister, the kid is a lot bigger? What's going on here? But then I watched it again. I was like, oh, that's what happened.
I get how that could throw you off.
It's been a long time.
Yeah. So my first clue was, was when they made a big deal out of saying, okay, it's the bicentennial. I didn't necessarily have like a reference point, but it was like something in the way that they emphasized that I was like, oh, are they indicating that time has passed? Because I didn't know like how many years since Piltover had been founded the first 3 episodes took place in. But the thing that confirmed it for me was when we first see Jace, and before he was like, kind of raw-boned and skinny and, still had a little bit of adolescence to him. And now we see him and he's like this, like, just, model chiseled jaw and, and you're like, oh, okay, we're all grown up here. Cool.
Yeah.
He's an adult now, and it's not that they forgot what they named the younger character and they reused the name. Really, it's the same person.
Yeah.
And they, Jace is funny to me. I'll borrow a joke from Honest Trailers. I don't think they'll mind, but welcome to Piltover, where magic is like science and science is like CrossFit.
Yeah.
Because it's always Jace with his shirt off, all muscly, with the hammer banging on things. And I'm like, yeah. It's like we're using precision instrumentation. Go ahead, Joelle.
I said I love science fantasy. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's fun.
For sure.
It's fun.
This is hard science fantasy.
Hard science
fantasy. Science fantasy.
Oh, Jace is hard science fantasy. I don't have such tendencies, but if I did, that animated character would be on my list. I do like the character.
Caitlyn is still completely oblivious to him in his interest. He's just like not noticing at all. Oh, here's the flowers. I'm going to drop them on the counter next to my pile of other flowers.
Well,
go ahead, Kacey.
I was going to say, like, I actually thought that was really, I am enjoying that dynamic between those two characters, between Caitlyn and Jace, because to me, it's obvious that he has at least a marginally romantic interest in her. And it's obvious to me that she's so clueless. He's her annoying brother figure that, he's always been around since she was a kid. And she's just very focused on the detective puzzle in front of her, right? Like she wants to get to the bottom of this because it's bothering her that that these things, you know, she sees these connections between these crimes and no one else does. And that's, you know, that's obviously her passion, something that's lit her up from the inside. And as the events of episode 4 progress with, you know, the attack on one of the buildings in downtown, I don't remember which one, but the one where she, you know, she notices the fire, she sounds the alarm, she's fighting the fire, and then realizes that it's essentially a booby trap. And the, you know, she sees the Jinx's like little signature graffiti glowy purple paint thing right before it explodes, and she's hurt. And so now this thing that was her passion has kind of edged over into obsession territory with her, because it's now super personal. Whereas before it was just like, you know, an intellectual puzzle that she was interested in.
And
I'd like to know.
Go ahead. I love what they did with her character, because it makes sense that she doesn't recognize that Jace is interested in her, because she is her mother's daughter. She's had people acting nice to her all her life, not because of herself, but because of her mom. And so she doesn't feel like she's accomplished anything. She's in position that she fought to be in, and here she's having a ceremonial role instead of doing the job. So she's got reason to believe that nobody would be interested in her for her.
Right. Well, and then exactly. And go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, that's not Justin.
No, I'm consciously trying not to talk over people because I have a tendency to do that. But the
same.
Caitlyn's character, I agree with you all about Caitlyn's character in large part. Being a heteronormative dude, maybe I'm just a little less sensitive. I didn't really think there was a lot of romantic tension in either direction with that pair, but again, like my sensitivity levels to that may be a little different. I like Caitlyn's character a lot because I enjoy the fact that she's a character who feels legitimate noblesse oblige, not just the patronizing kind. Because I do like that she wants to serve, like actually wants to serve, because as you know, in fiction and in the real world, not to name any names, but when you get a scion of a noble family, whatever that means in the current civilization, there's always an equivalent, and they end up in the service. Sometimes they're like Caitlyn, and they actually care and they want to do the job and they want to serve their civilization. And sometimes they're trying to earn a better regard from the common person to further their future career. And I enjoy Caitlyn for them choosing an aristocratic character and saying, no, but there are people who are born into privilege who care. I was not born into privilege, to be very clear. My family are coal miners and enlisted men. But I do appreciate that third dimension of, oh, we're not just going to break this down into scrappy, rebellious, undercity good, rich, wealthy, overcity bad. Like I do like.
Yeah, I enjoy that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to pop in about Caitlyn. Oh, and she's answering to Marcus, who we all know from the first act of the show is kind of a shitbag. So she's being you know, as a child of wealth and privilege who wants to do the job, she's still being shuffled aside unfairly because we know this guy kind of sucks, and because the very rational reason of any person in his position, he doesn't want to get an important family member of one of the council killed doing the job. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I got the vibe from him that he looks at her like, you know, ugh, here's the rich girl I got to babysit again, you know? And having, not often in my career, but it did happen a couple of times that I had to deal with sort of paternalistic attitudes from, you know, people more senior to me in the Air Force. And it sucks. You know, you're just like, dude, I'm just, you know, I'm just like you, only I don't know as much because I haven't been around as long, right? I'm just like you, only younger. So let me do my job. Yeah.
Yeah. I could believe that. Well, and especially, you know, I'm 39 and, you know, like this is a can of worms topic, but the like modifying gender roles for the military is, I think, a lot more complicated process than the military hierarchy has admitted. Like, not that it should be, but just by virtue of reality, that you have to have entirely different modes of behavior towards one another than you're used to in normal life. And
that's fair.
I'm not defending people who sidelined you because you're a woman. That's not okay. And I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that it's that process of adjustment is not complete, in my opinion, and is not helped by the fact that a lot of folks try to acknowledge and don't even acknowledge that it's a thing. On either side, that it's like, oh, we'll just be professional. And I'm like, that doesn't fully cover it. Just professional was easy when no one was attracted to anyone else or had, preconceived gender roles for anyone else. That was easy. People still failed at it. But yeah. So anyway,
but there was one set of,
there was one
standard.
One mode of behavior that has been around since, since the Roman Legion, at least, and arguably since the Phalanx. And to say like, oh, okay, well, we're going to change that dynamic now, but just act the same. It's like, it's a little more complicated than you might think it is. But again, that's a bit of a can of worms. So I'll stop there unless you guys want to say more about that. Obviously, you have a lot more relevant experience than I do.
So dragging the can of rooms over to Arcane. So
let's do that.
Not all these people, and you're choosing who to put on your rival gangs to fight each other, to try to deal with the Shimmer, and then you got Powder, who's now Jinx, and she's got unresolved issues. But you're gonna put her. You're gonna let her have a Gatling gun anyway. This is a great plan, and let me tell you, it will give you a beautiful scene. But I feel bad for Silco. He's been trying to raise this little powder keg of a wonderful fighter, but she just killed a bunch of his people. She doesn't even care.
Well, and the relationship between Silco and Powder / Jinx is one of my favorite things about the show.
It's and very interesting.
I did not expect to feel sorry for Silco ever. I got to say that. They are doing great things, like evolving the characters and showing us different angles. And he's definitely still the bad guy, and yet he's got minion troubles.
Yeah, no, and the fact that he defends Jinx from the minion who is not crazy and does seem competent indicates, to me at least at this point, that there are actual feelings involved and not just cold manipulation. She has become, in the time jump, more than just something he took from Vonder.
Yeah.
Which I enjoy.
Yeah, I do too. I'm kind of fascinated by the dynamic between the two of them, and I'm looking forward to seeing it more in the, in future episodes, because there's, I don't know, maybe it's, I grew up reading, old fantasy novels where the relationship dynamics between the heroes and heroines were not exactly what we would call healthy. But I find those things very interesting, right? And so, like, I'm curious. He holds her and he cuddles her, and he says things like, "I'm doing this for us, Jinx." And but is it a romantic relationship? Is it a parent-child relationship? Is it some grotesque hybrid of the two? I find that really interesting, and I'm looking forward to learning more about it. And here's the other thing: she's way crazy, right? I believe she keeps. If I interpreted the visuals correctly, she's keeping the skeleton of one of her brothers in her room.
I was hoping that it was a creation and not actually body parts.
I think it's body parts that have been modified is what I saw.
This Rorschach test is very revealing, Kacey.
Yes. Yeah. That's at the very least, his specter is, one of the like voices in her head that continues to torment her. And so here's my question, right? Like, she wasn't that crazy last time we left her. She was upset. She had issues. She was in the midst of trauma. But that in and of itself would not, I mean, I'm not a professional. I don't know if that in and of itself is enough to create those types of, reality breaking episodes in her head, you know what I mean? Without some kind of like reinforcement of either said trauma or, you know what I mean? Like, why didn't she heal from that? What happened during the time jump as their relationship developed that facilitated her getting to the point where she's at right now? That's what I'm interested. I want to know. And I hope that we get glimpses into that as the show continues.
Yeah. Great questions. I would say that Silco and Jinx, to me in this episode, it definitely feels paternal to me, but I think you're not wrong in that there's some definitely creepy overtones to it as well, and that it seems like their relationship is fascinating for drama and one that no one should ever have in real life if it can be avoided, because I think it falls into genuine but twisted, which is way bad. That no one in it is a complete manipulator. There is genuine affection. There is a genuine bond, and it's still twisted and
so unhealthy.
Yeah, so that's maybe the most dangerous type. But good Lord doesn't make good fiction. But don't. I always feel like with when it's part of fiction, I want to put a big like, don't idolize this. You can be fascinated by it, but it's like
right.
You can be fascinated by it, but it's like the Joker Harley Quinn dynamic. Only in
my
opinion,
I was just gonna say that. Yeah,
I was wondering if they looked at famous Joker Harley Quinn stills and were like, "Yes, we want to make it look like that."
Well, Jinx's aesthetic at least existed in the show prior to the game, but I can't help but think you're not wrong about that. However, I will say I enjoy these two more than I've enjoyed any iteration of Harley Quinn and Joker, including my beloved Batman the Animated Series introduction of the character of Harley Quinn, which was great. Don't get me wrong, when I was a kiddo, but I think this is way cooler, way more interesting, and just as twisted. And well, maybe not just as twisted in its own way, because in the Joker Harley Quinn dynamic, most of the time, Joker genuinely does not give a shit about Harley Quinn at all.
Right.
So this is actually more interesting to me, because I think Silco, and it's ambiguous at times how much he cares, but I think Silco does genuinely care, and to me that makes it more human and more interesting.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it wouldn't surprise me if that how much he cares is kind of on a sliding scale, right? So, Joelle mentioned earlier that like he's got issues because she just blew up a bunch of his, or mowed down a bunch of his men, right?
Yeah.
Which is, pretty,
I think most
not good business when you're a crime lord.
Yeah. I think most of the casualties were the other gang, but yeah, she still killed friendly. She still had a huge friendly fire incident.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and she was supposed to protect the cargo, and the cargo was actually lost in the explosion. I think, right? So, so failed in her objective at the same time, and he didn't seem to care at all about the minions that he lost, but he does seem to care about her. Which again, I'm with you on, Justin. I think that makes it much more interesting because, for better or for worse, when you care about someone, that involves a certain amount of vulnerability. So now we see a vulnerability in the character of Silco, who is still a fantastic mustache twirling villain, because he's not just mustache twirling. Now we have depth, and now we have something that makes him sympathetic to a degree. There's someone that he cares about. And then we also had him, learning a little bit about his backstory with Vonder in the previous episode. That also led to his a little bit more, sympathetic sympatheticness. I don't know if that's a word. Made him more sympathetic. Right. Yes. Made him more relatable. But yeah, but he doesn't give a shit about his other minions because they're just minions, right? They're numbers. He can always replace them. There's plenty of, the implication is that there's plenty of people in the Undercity who, he can just tap as needed to refill his resources because, there's poverty there, there's despair there, and he's a way up, It
makes you vulnerable to radicalization. Although that's an overused word lately, it's true. I would say too that it's interesting to me. So, in conjunction with his relationship with Jinx is his view of him, his skewed view of himself, right? Because he uses the rhetoric of, oh, well, we deserve more than the runoffs of the Overcity. We deserve better. We should be doing better. I'm doing this for not just me and Jinx, but for all of Undercity, except for you already have power in Undercity to a large degree, and nothing has gotten better.
You're the God King of the Undercity, but did nothing.
Right. Yeah, which indicates to me that even if you had the power, all the power, you're not going to rule any more kindly than the people who are already in charge, and maybe a lot worse, despite your rhetoric, which is, again, true to life of what we've seen in most revolutions. The revolution seems like a good idea. It's usually against a ruling class that sucks. Kacey and I have been knee deep in that with writing about the Russian Revolution, but America lucked out in how our revolution turned out, because most revolutions, you end up with something that's arguably a lot worse than what it replaced.
It's really
and we were
landing really hard.
And if you closely look at the early history of our country, it was a close thing, man. There were there were several episodes where it was like, what are we doing? What are we becoming here? Up to and including the American Civil War in the 1860s, So,
well, yeah. And I don't want to get too far off into real history, but you're spot on, that it's just, it was a much more fragile thing than we tend to think of. Especially when we had just the Articles of Confederation. We didn't even have the Constitution yet. It very much, the United States of America could have died in its infancy very easily. And I would, as a man of faith, I would chalk that up to divine providence and the work of some very dedicated people, that it didn't. But in Silco's case, I'm like, he's not a pastiche of any single revolutionary figure in the world, but he incorporates elements that make him feel real, both as a person in his relationship to Jinx, as a crime boss, as a movement leader. He's just so well written. And he comes across in the first episode as like, oh, this is just a guy who experiments on kitties and manipulates teenagers into becoming monsters. Right. And screw this guy, I don't care. Oh shit, no, you're gonna make me look at his humanity too. Good job, writers.
Story-wise, they picked a great time to do that, because this is also the first time in the season where there's someone who's aware of him and who possibly can start to have Piltover doing something against him. When Piltover was unaware, and it was just other people in the Undercity who knew about him, and even they didn't know that much. He had no threats against him, and now he might not be secure in his evil overlord status, and it might be worse to not have a single evil overlord.
Right, which that brings us back to Caitlyn, right? And Caitlyn and Marcus. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm in Marcus's shoes, I know this guy's bad news because I kind of helped put him where he is, right? And I don't know, we haven't been told if they have a continuing relationship. I can see it going both ways, right? But I can also, regardless, it's very clear to me that Marcus does not want the attention of Piltover and the authorities in Piltover on Silco, because that will ask questions that will lead back to Marcus. So now here's this annoying little rich girl, Caitlyn, who has resources at her command that he doesn't have because of who she is, because of her family, who could really, really screw things up for him if she doesn't stop asking her damn questions, and she's not going to, you know? And so I am
so great for this
I am
story.
Looking forward. What's that?
It's so great for the story, because what's going to happen?
I know, it's so good, and I'm so looking forward to the development of that narrative line.
Become like an evil person who tries to kill Caitlyn. Does he succeed?
Right.
I mean, there's so much that can happen.
Yeah, is it just going to be sabotage from above? You know, is it not just, you know, his sort of paternalistic attitude that's kind of keeping her down? Is it like a little bit of CYA going on as well? You know, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to all of that.
Yeah. In my opinion, it only gets better from here. It's so good. Yeah. So like that's all accurate. Caitlyn is now a much stronger, better character throughout. And we get to, we're going to get to see some more of her background and why she is the way she is. And it's good and rich and beautiful. So back in probably I call it the B plot with Jace and Victor. We have them pushing against Heimerdinger still, and Heimerdinger pushing against them still. And I love too that you're not at least at this point, I'm not entirely sure who's correct, because while obviously, like, you know, age and wisdom indicates you that go cautiously, you know, that's generally a good sign unless you really are under the gun and urgency is required. But, you know, I do like that Victor and Jace point out, like, hey, we could use this stuff to improve lives right now. You know, like we can get it on the field. We can make people wealthier, healthier, happier right now. I don't want to wait 10 years. We don't live thousands of years like you, furry little Yoda. You know, like, so, yeah. So at this point, where were your guys' sympathies lying? Because I found myself starting to shift towards Jace a little bit, even though he's a giant himbo. Like I was kind of like, no, I can get why they'd be impatient with Furball.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. Something about that little guy. Like I know you guys both thought it was interesting that I was like, he seems sinister to me, but he does. There's something about him that, like,
he's
I don't know,
close to the uncanny valley. I mean, he looks nothing like actual like humans, but he also he looks human enough that he's a little creepy.
Yeah. And I don't know. He seems like he has an ulterior motive, and whether or not he does within the story, that colors my perception of him. Right. So yeah, I was team Jace on this one too. Like, let's get it out there. Mm-hmm. But I did think it was interesting that, and I don't know if the writers are trying to deliberately portray Jace's naivete here, but I thought it was very interesting that the two, you know, applications that Jace and Victor chose to showcase for Heimerdinger, both of them were like, look, you know, this is like a mining tool that like crushes rock, and, you know, and this is a precision tool that like has this cool little laser thing on it, and they're both like immediately very violent. You know what I mean? Like you can obviously see how these could go wrong, like bad wrong.
It's like 2 seconds you guys, of thought to think about how to kill people with those. Yeah.
You guys chose terrible applications. You know, if you're not trying to
guy. Yeah.
Right. The risk adverse furry guy, you know, he's not going to go for that. Like, come on, man, do something else. You know, because if your argument is that these little glowy, now they're glowy spheres instead of magic glowy rocks. If the magic glowy sphere, you know, the magic glowy marble can power anything, why not a water filtration system? You know, like something that's a little less immediately, you know, applicable to breaking
we can
people
chop people in half with this.
Right.
Right. And we almost vaporized your dog.
Yeah, we need to talk strategy, boys. It's not a good one.
Think back to the statue of the guy who everything he built exploded, melted, or toppled over. That sounds like a brilliant war engineer to me.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you do get, they're never explicit about it because they wisely are focusing on Piltover and Zahn, but you do get the impression that Piltover is not alone in the world. They talk about ambassadors coming from elsewhere, so military application
and the States connect for trade to elsewhere.
Yeah. So military application would still seem to be relevant, but not how you're going to approach persuading this dude that you need to more widely adopt your tech. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And especially when it almost, I'm not a scientist. I've never, been in a laboratory environment, but I have to imagine, one, you're not bringing your dog to a field test anyway, but that almost vaporizing the head guy's dog is probably a bad way to go if it is there.
Yeah. So I thought that, speaking of that dog, I thought it was an interesting choice that when during one of the, I guess it was the opening scene or opening sequence, when Heimerdinger's telling Jace that he's been selected to give the Progress Day speech, that they kept cutting to the dog, and the dog like up against it was almost like it was trapped. And I'm like, okay, what are we telling me here? Okay, storytellers, what does this mean? What are you telling me? Because that's like hanging a gun on the wall, right? Like it has to mean something. Otherwise it's bad storytelling. And these guys are obviously not bad storytellers. So
yeah.
But I still haven't figured it out.
Yeah. I do like that Jace backs down. I like that, like, he does exercise caution despite his own, what he thinks. He's willing to say, all right, I'll defer in this time, because it makes it, earlier decisions to proceed and maybe stuff that happens later. It makes him seem less one note, that he does actually consider things from other people's points of view. Again, despite appearing sometimes like a giant sort of clueless puppy.
Right.
Who just happens to be brilliant with this one magical technology, and kind of clueless everywhere else, which is a valid trope for a reason, I suppose.
Well, it's a more accurate characterization than the more common one of the guy who is brilliant in all areas.
Right. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. I kid.
Here's a microbiology problem. Let's bring in somebody who's an astrophysicist. They'll understand it immediately.
Yeah, they'll totally get it.
It's usually story efficiency, right? Is like, we've got a science guy. Like, and sometimes our science guy is also just the doctor, and he's good at physics too. It's like we can't have a spaceship crew like this, not Arcane, but like in our spaceship crew, we only have 5 or 6 people in a season we can make people care about, and we're gonna load the science onto one dude because everybody else is action adventure person.
But but like you said, that's definitely not the case here. They have a whole city, right? It speaks to the skill again of the storytellers that they're able, and I keep saying storytellers instead of writers because I've talked in other episodes about how important I think the visuals are to this particular medium of storytelling. So, but it speaks to the skill of the storytellers that they are able to recognize that, to keep his character more realistic, more nuanced, and thereby condense the story down to a few enough characters that we can remember who they are and not get lost in these, like, oh, who's this guy again now?
No, you're absolutely right. I'm enjoying, like, obviously Jinx's plotline, and as we know at the end of the episode, we get Vi gets reintroduced. It's kind of the heart of the show, but I really, while I didn't care as much, I'm at this point I start to care a lot more about Jace's plotline. And it continues to get more important and more interesting. And especially Mel is about to take a much bigger role. And I enjoyed that greatly. She's one of my absolute favorite characters. I'll confess, I am not immune to the depiction of human beauty. She's a great character design.
Yeah, she's beautiful. Yeah.
She's a great character design, but she's also just so fascinating and much more complicated than she initially appears, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what her next moves are, because she was Jace put her in a bad position. She had spoken with investors about this new technology. She was fully expecting a full announcement. And so now she has to go and backtrack and repair relationships. And she doesn't strike me as the kind of person who's just going to let that go. You know what I mean? But her next move is to elevate Jace. And I'm super interested because I love that kind of like subtle intrigue storyline. I find that stuff fascinating. This is Justin not spoiling things for me.
That's correct. I am avoiding spoilers because I'm very excited for you to see the rest of the show.
Yeah, me too.
Gosh, so I think we've kind of been through the basic events of it. Any notes before we start wrapping up? I think I covered most of what I'd like to talk about. Team?
I'm
Joelle,
still,
Kacey?
you know, I'm sorry. I'm just going to jump in. You guys are
no, go
tired
ahead.
of me. I still find Jinx incredibly sympathetic. Like she's broken, right? She's not nice. She does bad things for bad reasons. She's selfish, but I still find her incredibly sympathetic, you know? So far still Team Powder.
The Rorschach test continues to reveal. Okay, Joelle, you go.
Yeah, I don't feel great about myself for being Team Jinx, but yeah. I mean, she's got her lab now. That's what I wanted for her. She has a lab. She has things that mostly work.
Mostly work.
She totally messes up her mission, but she still comes back with the new magic rack that is shiny and the people in Piltover think, well, maybe there's somebody down there who could do something with it. And like, yes, there it definitely is, and it's going to be amazing.
Marvelous. I like your phrase, your very precise phrasing, things that mostly work, which all three of us, having worked with military equipment, we know that is that is the status you're likely to be working with, is it mostly works. No, I will say Jinx continues to be fascinating and somewhat sympathetic. I think you will all get to like Violet better as the story continues, because she gets some good development too. Although she is always a little bit more, it's the protagonist problem. The person who's trying to do the right thing because it's the right thing, if you're not careful, does end up feeling a little more vanilla. But I do think Vi is well developed and good. And that's all I'm going to say. Although I guess at the end of the series, it is set up that Caitlyn and Vi have, or at the end of this episode, Caitlyn and Vi have met. And that's going to be interesting going forward.
I hope, I don't know if we get to see their conversation in the next episode, but I really want to. I might go watch it after we record this, honestly.
I've already started the next
episode. Yeah, so we'll see.
All right, awesome. Okay, last alibis. Anything else? And then I'm going to close this out. Okay, cool. Joelle, what's out next? What's out now? What are you excited about coming up in your world of writing?
I just finished another edit for a short story that I'm giving away free to my newsletter readers that's set in the Dabare snake launcher world.
Awesome.
So make sure.
Which I now know how to spell.
Yes. So the Dabare snake launcher novel is coming out in November from Baen Books. Sign up for my newsletter so that if you want to, for instance, have the ebook instead of the paper copy, I will tell you as soon as that's available for pre-order. And you will also soon get this short story.
And I get to read Dabare sooner than all of you because I'm so cool. Go ahead, Kacey.
I think the next thing that I have coming out is in September, the Valkyries Initiative launches from Chris Kennedy Publishing. Awesome. It's a spinoff of the Hit World universe, which is this cool, like, urban fantasy noir setting. It's an anthology published by the Valkyries Initiative is an anthology edited by Marisa Wolf, and I have a story in that where I get to write about a fashionista. So, and Joelle's in it too, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And not my story, but in the anthology.
September 16th.
What's that?
I think September
16th. Yeah. Yeah, they just released the cover. It's very cool. But yeah, so that comes out in September, and then after that, I think we're looking at fall sometime for No Game for Knights, which is the second of 3 noir anthologies edited by me and Larry Correa. That one's really cool. You guys are going to like that one. And I think that's it that's been announced so far. So still working on my space opera and working on the next alternate history Russian Revolution with Justin. So yeah.
There you go.
Don't worry, man. I haven't forgotten.
Don't forget to mention the one that I'm co-authoring with the dude who's hosting the podcast.
Right. Yeah, the one that the first installment
I know you've got a dozen projects.
I just talked
The Romanov Rescue, which is available now in hardcover and ebook, and will be out in November in paperback. Yeah. So
and is eligible for a Dragon Award. So
yes,
Dragon Award nomination. God, I'm such an amateur.
And put the link for the Dragon Award nominations in there too, please, Justin, so people can easily put their nominations in.
Yeah.
Right, and so
a link to the
let
Dragon
me just
Award
make one plea.
Yes, Kacey.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just make one plea. Okay, even if you don't vote for Romanov Rescue for alternate history, which you absolutely should because it's amazing and we worked really hard. But even if you don't vote for it, vote for something, right? Like just go in and nominate your favorites because it's a fan run award. And so it doesn't work if we don't have lots of fan representation. So it would be awesome. Even if you don't vote for us, even if you don't nominate our work, go in and nominate the stuff you love.
And after you've sent in your nomination, check your spam filter, check your email, make sure you click the response to confirm that it really was you sending in the nomination. Otherwise, it will not count.
Yeah.
Good tip. Good tip, Joe. Thanks. Yeah.
All right, cool. Did we cover everything?
All right.
Awesome. Sorry, I kept.
Bye, folks.
I wasn't trying to shut anyone up. I was not trying to shut people up. Okay, so this channel is not monetized. So if you'd like to support what we do here, please consider buying one of our books. Links will be in the liner notes below, as will links to newsletters, websites, all that good stuff, and the Dragon Awards. And please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, or if you're listening to this on audio, a 5-star review on your favorite podcast venue would be appreciated greatly. That's all the time we have for Lore and Valor now. Hope to see you next time, and until then, keep up the fire.